I've watched countless near-death experience stories, and so many of them are the same. So many people meet Jesus. Some don't, but what is the same is that people have a spiritual experience of life after death that is more alive than we are now in this realm. And it also, when they come back, it changes their life entirely. We are more than this physical realm with these beast political systems ruling over us. One of the best, or a great near-death experience to watch would be that of Howard Storm. This man was an atheist. He had no spiritual belief system. He was a very selfish man. And it just completely changed his life. And, when you look at some of Howard's near-death experience talks on YouTube, different places, he is by no means a traditional Christian, in the sense that, he's not ruled by church dogma. He believes, and he understands that the greatest thing is what Jesus was teaching is love, to love your neighbor, to love God. And no matter what people try to say, or no matter what comes out of these changed history and genealogies, the greatest thing that we have is that we are spiritual people, and that we have to learn to love God and to love our neighbor and to live our lives according to that and be our own kings and priests. So many people, including scholars who have researched the history of Christianity, have come to the opinion it didn't exist until the time of Emperor Constantine. Well, of course it didn't. Christianity is not Roman Catholicism, which has led some to conclude that it was created by him. It didn't really exist before Constantine's time, but those behind the creation of this religion were his ancestors. What Constantine did when he became emperor was revive it. There is really no good reason to believe Constantine converted to Christianity because of faith, no matter how often an authority in the world of academia says otherwise. Emperor Julius Constantius Chlorus, father of Emperor Constantine and of Julius Constantius I, ruled from 305 to 307 CE, and he was co-emperor with Galerius. Emperor Constantine was the son of Emperor Constantius Chlorus and Helena, and ruled from 307 to 337 CE. Other important relatives include Tacitus, Emperor Trajan, Pliny the Younger, and Suetonius, Antonius Pius. But with the knowledge that these individuals are related to Arius Piso, this information can shed new light on another argument for Christianity existing before and during Nero's reign. These are the mentions of Christiani, whose leader is Christus by Tacitus, who was related to Arius and even uses his alias name when describing events in history. If Tacitus was related to Arius and he used his various alias names within his literature, then the mention of Christiani and Christus and the persecution of Christianity by Nero can logically be seen as a pretense, making something that is not the case appear true. And an example of what can be called propaganda against an emperor that angered the aristocracy of Rome, which contributed to his assassination. Emperor Constantine is made into the new Jesus by the church father Eusebius, who was Julius Constantius I, Constantine's half-brother. Emperor Constantius Chlorus used the name Eusebius as Pope Eusebius, so we begin our count from him through his descendants who used that name as well. So Chlorus is aka Eusebius I, and his son is Eusebius II, and so on. The information suggesting Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity cannot be trusted. Constantine adopted the Christian religion created by his ancestors as a tactical move to unite the many desperate pagan tribes in the Roman Empire under just one belief system, leading to more unity right across the empire. And there's no doubt that happened with the Roman Catholic Church. So that's why I want to explore this line of thought, because we need to distinguish between Roman Catholicism and the early church, or the original story of Jesus in Judea at that time. So there has been a lot of lies and confusion relating to the Roman Catholic Church and Christianity as we know it, and all churches as we know it, whether they be Roman Catholic or whether they be Protestant. The church in itself has been very corrupt and damaging to society. And the only good thing we had that really has come out of it was that people chose to live a life that was moral. And it's really important to society that we have a foundation of morality, because let's face it, every empire, including the Roman Empire, when it loses its morality, falls apart. And this is exactly what we're experiencing today in our own society. As mentioned earlier, St. Jerome translated the biblical text into Latin. St. Jerome was a descendant of Emperor Constantine. His name was Flavius Julius Eusebius of Rome. So St. Julius Eusebius of Rome, his line of descent is below. So we have Arius Calpurnius Piso, aka Flavius Josephus, Julius Calpurnius Piso, Julius Calpurnius Piso II, Julius Calpurnius Piso III. So apparently this genealogy goes all the way from Flavius Josephus, Annius Verus I, or Arius Calpurnius Piso, from 37 CE to 119 CE, all the way down to Flavius Julius Eusebius of Rome, St. Jerome, Pope Boniface I. So if this is true, it's showing a direct lineage of the Roman Catholic popes from these Flavian families. And I am going to go back into the notes that have been left by this website, the references, and I'm going to try to see if these lineage claims are based on other people's work. So this is part of the I guess conspiracy you'd call it, is that the relationship between the Herodians, Flavians, and the Pisos is from Herod the Great, his son Aristobulus, Herod Agrippa I, and Herod Pollio, which is his brother. And from Herod Pollio, we've got Vespasia Polla and Vespasius Polo II. Vespasia Polla Titus Flavius Sabinus. So if he would have been a Herod as well. From it, probably not forgetting that, you know, King Herod had a brother Phasaelus, and he had a sister Salome, and they had children. So a lot of these families were tying back into this lineage. Titus Flavius Sabinus II, Flavius Sabina, Aria the Younger, who was Teresa Patius Gaius Calpurnius Piso, and Arius Calpurnius Piso was the niece of Vespasian. And let's not forget too that Vespasian's son Titus also had an affair with Bernice, the sister of Agrippa II, who was a Herod, and we all know how they like to keep it in the family. There are other reasons for this connection having been found and indicated, but I will have to find those notes as well. These are a lot of things going on involving the persons who are seen as the founders of the Vespasian family line. Herod Polio was Prince of Chalcis and titular king of Palestine 44 to 48 CE. King Herod the Great was descended from the Maccabees via Eleazar Aaron. Flavia, that's an interesting line. Flavia Domitilla I was also the wife of Emperor Vitellius. Domitia Longina, the wife of Domitian, was mother of Trajan, but Domitian was not his father. Trajan's father was Lucius S. Titanius, the brother of Otho. Right, so Otho was also the emperor, and his wife was Poppaea Sabina, and she was the wife of Nero. And we have that video I did on the possible persecution of the Christians coming from her connections to Judaism and her influence over Emperor Nero. So the Vespasian claim to the Herod Polio line comes from this book, Pedigree and Progress, Essays in the Genealogical Interpretation of History by Sir Anthony Richard Wagner. Sir Anthony Richard Wagner in 1952, this image was taken while Wagner was Richmond Herald of Arms. This image is from the personal collection of English Wikipedia user Reddy Roth, and he has released it into the public domain. So he's got heraldry in England, heralds and ancestors, English genealogy, heralds and heraldry in the Middle Ages, heralds of England, historic heraldry of Britain, pedigree and progress, an essay in genealogical interpretation. So there's some interesting books there. So I can't get this book unless I buy it. But I'm going to quote Henry Davis, and he's done this paper on the royal ancestry of Emperor Vespasian. I'm going to find the quotes that he takes from Richard Wagner. Vespasian's genealogy. Priestly lineage was enthusiastically recorded by Jerusalem's conservative ruling aristocracy, and it was the priest's job to regulate the priestly courses or groups. It is highly unlikely that Josephus would have claimed descent from the Hasmonean royal house if he was not of that lineage, especially considering the audience for his works. Therefore, he must have been a descendant of that royal house, surely. When taking a step back, there are only certain facts available to work with those being that his genealogy can only be traced back through King Herod the Great and his first wife Mariamne I. As a son of Matthias, Josephus' descent would be from the Hasmonean royal house, but because of what is known about the royal house, his genealogy makes no sense. Therefore, if we note the reasoning of Steve Mason above regarding the possible genealogical fabrication and follow the advice of the late Sir Ronald Syme regarding as the greatest historian of ancient Rome since Theodore Mommsen, when the attempt is made to expose a fraud attack on all fronts, is it to be commended. Syme, Emperors and Biography Studies in the Historia Augusta. It is logical to examine more deeply other possible ancestral lines for Josephus, and this is where preconceptions need to be put aside. We find nothing in the Talmud or other Jewish commentary relating to Josephus, despite the man himself stating he is a general magistrate and teacher again, as Steve Mason says. Although Josephus most often refers to himself as a general, he is plainly much more than that: governor, chief magistrate, teacher, and supreme patron. He quickly evolves from membership in a triumvirate to sole mastery of the region. Essentially, he is the man whose position is legitimized not by an office but by the populace overwhelming affirmation of his virtue, prestige, and authority. That comes from Flavius Josephus' Translations and Commentary, Volume 9. Pedigree and Progress, an essay in genealogical interpretation of history. One important name that re-emerged with certain individuals was the name Pollio, whose individuals being Vespasius Pollio and Herod Pollio, grandson of Herod the Great and Mariamne. Pollio is also recorded as Herod the second, third, fourth, and fifth, and Herod king of Chelcis. He also had a titular rank of praetor, a Roman magistrate. Supporting references to this come from Sir Anthony Richard Wagner, Pedigree and Progress, essays in genealogical interpretation of history. Both the Pollio name and a connection to Herodians and the Flavians in 44 CE. At the age of 16, Julia Bernice, sister of King Agrippa II and granddaughter of Aristobulus IV, became the second wife of Herod Pollio, her uncle, but he died when she was 20. Also, as mentioned, both Bernice and Agrippa publicly supported the Flavians during the Jewish revolt. Herod Pollio's first wife was a woman called Mariamne IV, whom he married in approximately the late 20s CE, and she was the daughter of Joseph ben Joseph, Herod the Great's nephew, and Olympias, the Herodian daughter of Herod the Great. A son is recorded from this marriage. His name is Aristobulus III, who later became Aristobulus of Chalcis. Right. Reference to this is from Josephus Bellum Judicum, William Smith Dictionary of Greek and Roman Biography and Mythology. So Pollio is a common extra-personal name given to ancient Roman citizens, which the family of Herod the Great became. However, when dates the family tree for these individuals are compared using the gathering of scattered data, they are alike, only with different names having been used, essentially indicating they were the same person. So, Bernice, who had the affair with Vespasian's son Titus, it was her husband's first wife who had the child Aristobulus III, who became Aristobulus of Chalcis. So this ties in with Salome and her 3 sons. She married her cousin Aristobulus of Chalcis. Aristobulus V of Chalcis was the son of Herod of Chalcis, and his first wife Mariamne, Herod of Chalcis, ruler of Chalcis in Iturea, was a grandson of Herod the Great through his father Aristobulus IV. Mariamne was a granddaughter of Herod the Great through her mother Olympias. Hence, Aristobulus was a great-grandson of Herod the Great on both sides of his family. Aristobulus married to Salome after the death of her husband Philip the Tetrarch. With her, Aristobulus had 3 sons, Herod, Agrippa, and Aristobulus. This gets confusing because there's too many Aristobuluses. 3 coins with portraits of him and Salome have been found. Aristobulus did not directly succeed his father as ruler of Chalcis. Rather, upon his father's death in 48 AD, the Emperor Claudius gave the realm to Aristobulus' first cousin, Herod Agrippa II. When in 53 AD, Agrippa was given the territories previously governed by Philip the Tetrarch, also known as Herod Philip II, and Lysanias, Aristobulus was subsequently given Chalcis in 57 AD. He reigned Chalcis until his death in 92 AD, when the territory became part of the Roman province of Syria. He has been identified with the Aristobulus appointed by Nero as king of Armenia Minor in 55 AD. So according to this timeline, Salome was married to the son of Herod the 5th of ruler of Chalcis, also known as Herod Polio. So we have Herod V, Herod of Chalcis, also known as Herod Polio, king of Chalcis, and listed by the Jewish Encyclopedia as Herod II. He was brother of Herod Agrippa I and Herodias, Salome's mother. So his son Aristobulus, ruler of Chalcis, was the husband of Herodias' daughter Salome. So this mother of Vespasian, Vespasia Pola, also known as Vespasia Polia, is a first century, was the mother of Roman Emperor Vespasian and grandmother to the Emperor Titus and Domitian. Pola came from an equestrian family in Nursia. And her father was apparently Herod the Fifth, or Herod the Second. They've got so many names. Herod of Chalcis, Herod Polio. So she was the sister-in-law of Salome, of the famous dance for John the Baptist's head, and her brother would have been Aristobulus, ruler of Chalcis. So Salome and Aristobulus were the aunt and uncle of Emperor Vespasian according to this genealogical history. So Herod Polio, son of Aristobulus IV, the brother of Herod Agrippa I, who was the uncle of Bernice, and son of Herod Agrippa I and Herodias, was granted the kingdom of Chalcis in 41 CE. The Emperor Tiberius Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. The birth date for Herod Polio is concluded from information provided in Josephus' Antiquities. There we read that Agrippa I was in his 54th year when he died in the summer of 44 CE. If his 54th year began in late 43 CE, his birth can be concluded as being in the late 11 BCE. His father Aristobulus the First or the Fourth had returned from Rome in late 12 BCE. So Vespasius Pola, whose wife is unnamed in history, is recorded as an equestrian from Nursia, Italy, equestrians being above ordinary citizens. He became a tribunus militum, tribune of the soldiers, 3 times, those of equestrian rank who served as military tribune often became senators. He is also recorded as becoming a praefectus castrorum no earlier than the time of Augustus. Vespasius is recorded as having a son and daughter. The daughter's name is recorded as Vespasia Polia, and we can logically conclude the son was recorded as Vespasius Polio. James Anderson, D.D. Royal Genealogies. Suetonius recorded that the son became a senator with the rank of praetor, a praetor of which exercised extensive authority in a government. Pola is described as being superior to her husband in social position, for her husband, Titus Flavius Sabinus I, Suetonius, states he farmed the public tax of a 40th in Asia, and there existed for some time statues erected in his honor by the cities of Asia. Suetonius states that many monuments of the family of the Vespasii were still to be seen in his time at a village called Vespasiae between Nursia and Spoletum, therefore in the Sabine country, affording strong proof of the renown and antiquity of the house. Suetonius Liob, Life of Vespasian. Okay, so we have this Vespasia Pola of Galli, Julia Pola, Julia of Chalcis, married to T. Flavius Sabinus, a tax gatherer in Asia who had 2 sons, T. Flavius Sabinus II and the future Emperor Vespasian. And this name Sabinus reminds me of Poppaea Sabina. And Poppaea Sabina gets her name from her mother, Poppaea Sabina the Elder. Poppaea Sabina the Elder was an aristocratic woman who lived during the Principate. During her lifetime, she was famed for her beauty, but as Ronald Syme writes, her fame and follies have been all but executed by her homonymous daughter, Poppaea Sabina the Younger. She met her end as a victim of the Empress Valeria Messalina, wife of Claudius. And what's interesting is that Poppaea's family is from Pompeii, and Mariamne, the sister of Bernice, had a son, and he was a Herod, and he was killed in the eruption of Mount Vesuvius that destroyed Pompeii. So Poppaea Sabina the Elder was the daughter of Gaius Poppaeus Sabinus, was a Roman senator who served as consul in AD 9 with Quintus Sulpicius Camerinus as a colleague. He enjoyed a friendship of the emperors Augustus and Tiberius. So this name Sabinus, Gaius Poppaeus Sabinus' grandfather, would be a Flavian name, married to T. Flavius Sabinus. It's a family name, so there's our link. There's our link to Poppaea Sabina, if this is accurate. And the fires of Rome and the blaming of the Christians and her influence over Nero. This name Sabinus is showing up here again in Judea. And according to the Jewish Virtual Library, Sabinus, Roman official Sabinus, then Augustus, treasurer in Syria, was sent to Judea after Herod's death in 4 BCE to take charge of the latter's estate as procurator. On his arrival, he acceded to the request of Varus, governor of Syria, to hand over the custody of the citadels and treasures to Herod's son Archelaus, pending Caesar's decision concerning Herod's will. However, immediately after the departure of Varus and Archelaus for Antioch and Rome, respectively, he took possession of the royal palace and demanded from the custodian particulars regarding Herod's treasure. Sabinus' conduct caused a revolt on the festival of Shavuot, when many pilgrims had assembled in Jerusalem. Sabinus seized the tower of Faisal, from which he gave the signal to attack the rebels. As the battle developed, the Romans set fire to the temple chambers, capturing and plundering the temple treasury. These acts further enraged the people, and they besieged the royal palace where Sabinus and his followers had fortified themselves. The Jews demanded that the Romans leave the city, offering to spare the lives of Sabinus, but Sabinus would not trust it. Riots continued throughout Judea until Varus hurried back to suppress them. When he reached Jerusalem, Sabinus fled. Titus Flavius Sabinus was the name of several notable ancient Romans, including Titus Flavius Sabinus, father of Emperor Vespasian, Titus Flavius Sabinus, brother of Vespasian. Titus Flavius Sabinus was a Roman senator who was active in the 1st century, and Titus Flavius Sabinus, nephew of Vespasian. So this seems to be Sabinus. This is a Flavian name because all of these people are related to the Flavians. So his brother of Vespasian was a consul, Suffectus, in 47 AD, a prefectus under Emperor Nero. So, this Sabinus name, Gaius Poppaeus Sabinus, seems to be a family name related to the Flavians, who are more than likely related to the Herods. So is it possible that Poppaea Sabina was a Herod herself? I can't prove that, but there's seems to be a link there. So says here that this would mean that Emperor Vespasian would be of royal blood, and anyone descending from either Vespasian or his brother could then trace their ancestry back to King Herod the Great, and then also to his ancestry and or that of his wives, including Mariamne I. This also means that Roman historians presenting Vespasian as a military man with very humble origins who had risen to become emperor is also an illusion. Presenting Vespasian as a commoner during this time in Judea would give the ordinary soldiers the hope that they too could perhaps one day become emperor, leading to the support of his bid for the throne. The reality, however, behind the scene was that Vespasian was a royal. So what's interesting, if Vespasian was a Herod and his cousin was Agrippa II, then it just makes the whole Roman Jewish war far more interesting, because if in the Jewish revolt they threw Agrippa II out and they dethroned him. He was the final Herod to sit on the throne of Judea, and perhaps the vengeance of the Herods and the Romans for doing this was that Vespasian destroyed Judea. So we have this statue here of Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, and that is Agrippa II, and he has a very similar look to Vespasian. They have that sort of squashed nose, like they've been boxing. These guys, this one's a bit older than the other one, obviously. So the coin profile has a very similar look to it. Have a closer look, that's Emperor Vespasian. And we have this coin of Herod Agrippa II, which has a very similar profile, although it is hard to tell as a coin, but they do have a very similar look. Vespasian, Herod Agrippa. And there does appear to be a genetic similarity. So Herod Agrippa was born around AD 27-28. Vespasian was born around AD 9. So he was older than Herod Agrippa. And Herod Agrippa II's sister Bernice of Cilicia was born around 28. So AD 28. So she would have been around 19 years younger than Vespasian. So Vespasian's son Titus was said to be 11 years younger than Bernice. So Titus was born around 39 AD. So if Bernice was born in 28 AD, that would make her 11 years older than Titus. And we have this coin here from Titus, and he definitely does have that same look as Agrippa II and Vespasian. Anyway, there does seem to be some evidence that Vespasian was a Herod, and it seems that history may have been hidden from not only the Roman people but us as well, because we start looking into the genealogies of our own aristocratic families, and they all claim that they go back to Constantine the Great, who may have been a descendant of the Flavian family, and obviously investigate that. And when was this dragon chained? If we go to Revelation, in Revelation 20, it tells us that and then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold of the dragon, or that serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. He cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal upon him, so that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years were finished. But after these things he must be released for a little while. So when the dragon was free, he deceived the nations. And he was obviously free to persecute the church. In Revelation 12, we have the sign of the great dragon. Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and drew them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, who was ready to give birth, to devour her child as soon as it was born. She bore a male child who was to rule the nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. So she flees into the wilderness, which is the nations of the earth, and the dragon is still free, but it was in heaven, which we know as to be the kingdom of Israel, the kingdom of heaven. And a third of the angels of heaven, or the people, the third, Israel is known as God's third. They were thrown to the earth as well. And that happened in the fall of Jerusalem in 66 to 70 AD. So the dragon was still free at that point. It says a war broke out in heaven. Michael, which translates to he who was like God, and his angels or messengers fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, but they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the Herods were cast out of the kingdom of Israel. So that great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So they were cast into the nations, into the earth, to Rome. Then I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before our God day and night, has been cast down. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives to death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, because he knows that he has a short time. And you know, we look at Jesus calling the scribes and the Pharisees the sons of Cain and Satan, and Esau and Edom intermarried with the Canaanites, and they persecute the church of Jacob, of the family of Jacob. Now when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness. And it was the beast of Babylon. The lion of Babylon had the wings of an eagle. So it says the first was like a lion, and it had wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a human being, and the mind of a human was given to it. So she's in the wilderness. So she was nourished for a time, away from the presence of the serpent, the dragon. So the serpent spewed water out of its mouth like a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. And the water, I've heard it explained, is false doctrine, false teaching. So we have this water of the dragon, which might be considered the false doctrine of the early Roman church. But what happened is, it says here, the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of its mouth. And if we look at that, the earth took up the belief in the false Christian doctrine of the Roman Catholic Church, and the true church hid amongst the earth. So although the dragon created this doctrine of false Christianity, also what's happened is that it's disguised the woman and the church amongst the peoples of nations of the earth. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring, who kept the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So at this point, the dragon's free. It's persecuting the woman. It's spewing forth water. And if we look at what water is, so Jesus talks to the Samaritan woman in John 4, and he tells her that, verse 7, when a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For the Jews do not associate with Samaritans." Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water." "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also the sons of his livestock?" And what the woman's saying here is she is one of the lost 10 tribes of Israel. So when the apostles went to the nations and went to the Samaritans, and it's saying that they were preaching the gospel to the lost 10 tribes, the leftover remnants of Israel. So when we talk about the southern kingdom, Jesus went to Judah, Levi, and Benjamin. They were the last 3 tribes, part of the southern kingdom of Israel, that fell in the Roman Jewish wars. They were cut off and cast out of heaven. But earlier, the northern kingdom was cast out before the southern kingdom went to Babylon. So this woman was a descendant of Jacob, and she's telling Jesus that. She knows she is. Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water, welling up to eternal life." And the woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." So Jesus is the rock. Moses struck the rock in the desert, which gave the Israelites water to drink. And Moses did disobey God and strike the rock twice. But the striking of the rock was to represent the death of Jesus. So he was only struck once, and he is the living water. And so what is the dragon's water? Jesus' message is of the kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, and he brings a message of love, to love God with your whole heart and to love your neighbor as you do yourself, and all of the teachings and moral principles behind his followers. So then from his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away with the torrent. And the water that the dragon spewed forth was its false doctrine of that started with Roman Catholicism and everything that links to it. And the earth took up this faith, and the Roman leaders invented Christianity, well, they invented Roman Catholicism to control the pagan world. And I think they also invented it to control Christianity because it was something that gave people, it was liberating to people's mind. It gave them personal freedom, and it encouraged them to be sovereign outside of the imperial rule and the aristocratic rule. And it created its own religion, its own water that it spewed forth, and the earth swallowed it up. And the true church among the earth has always managed to hide amongst this false doctrine. But the church, the dragon church, has pursued the believers in sovereignty, and it has persecuted and also murdered them. So we have the early Roman Empire persecution of Christians and martyrs, and we have the later Roman Catholic Church persecution of Christians and burning them at the stake. And we have this supposed dark age. We have the Roman Church that supposedly started back in like 200 AD, the 2nd century AD, and maybe a bit earlier. And then we have the collapse of Rome, it says Rome, around 476 AD to 1000 AD, and this period of history that is hard to trace. And then we have the martyrs of the Reformation, and that's like 1,000 years after the Dark Ages. So this massive amount of time period that seems to have been added to our history. And then we have the Jesuit Counter-Reformation, which is the dispensationalism and the futurism by throwing all the prophecies of Revelation into the future and making people think that they haven't already happened or been fulfilled. And I ask you, if these same people are the descendants of the people that supposedly started Christianity, then why has it taken them so much effort to destroy the faith of people who believe in Jesus and the understanding of sovereignty that comes out of Christianity and following God? And our history has been completely molded by this battle between people that want sovereignty and spirituality and people that want to control using the church. So at some point this dragon was chained, and it talks about the beasts from the sea and the beasts from the earth, and the dragon gives both of these beasts power. Just because these beasts have the power to do what they will, even if the dragon is chained, the dragon still gives them the power to do what they do to the church, to the earth. And I'm not sure when the dragon was chained exactly, but it has 1,000 years of the loss of ability to have its free will on earth, and it's released for a little season, and I believe we're in that little season. So perhaps when Rome fell, that's when the dragon was chained. Perhaps when the resurrected saints and Jesus was resurrected and his kingdom became about. But it still seems to appear that the dragon was loose when the apostles were doing their preaching throughout the Roman world. And sometime shortly after, that's when the dragon was chained. And I'm thinking maybe it may have been at the fall of Rome, but I'll have to do some more investigating is to find when that actually happened. So it would appear that this woman riding the beast is actually riding the dragon. In Revelation 17, it talks about the great whore that sitteth on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-coloured beast, full of names of blasphemy, and of 7 heads and 10 horns. So the beast is red, it's scarlet, it's Edom, and the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet colour. Now, purple was the dye that was made by the Phoenicians. It was a very expensive dye because it was made from special shellfish that they would grind up. And having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her head was the name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, the abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with the great admiration. Now, who's the one that killed the martyrs of Jesus? And in the early persecution of the church, it was the Pharisees and the elites of Judea that were initially chasing the apostles and the believers in Jesus and persecuting them. They were the first persecution. Secondly, then it became from Rome and eventually from the Roman Catholic Church. It says, and the angel said unto me, wherefore did thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, of the beast that carries her, and which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. So in Revelation 12, we've got the dragon with the 7 heads and the 10 horns. But we also have the beast. The other beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. So if we look at this other beast in Revelation 13, there's the dragon that stood on the shore of the sea. And I saw a beast coming out of the sea. And this beast has 10 horns and 7 heads with 10 crowns on its horns. And it looks like a leopard, and it's a mixture of all the beasts of Daniel. It's not scarlet coloured. So the beast that the woman's actually riding is different. This is the dragon she's riding. And the beast thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. The beast was, so if the dragon, the beast was the Herod family, the 7 crowns have gone, so it was, and then it's not anymore, because but here it's saying the beast that thou saw was not and is not shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. So it's not coming out of the ocean or the sea, it's coming out of the bottomless pit. And it goes into perdition, perdition is being cut off. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. And here is a mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. So when we look at mountains are kingdoms, or like the mountain of God, the mountain of the New Jerusalem is a mountain. So it's a political system and a political kingdom. So she's sitting on 7 political powers. And there are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet come, and when he cometh, he must continue a short space. So the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. The woman which thou sawest is the great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. And which is the city that reigns over the kings of the earth? And that, I believe, is Jerusalem, because it says here it's where the martyrs of God were killed. And it's the city that they're always fighting for to rule the earth from. But if we go into Revelation 12, we've got the woman, and there's a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the woman is given the wings of a great eagle so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness. So she's in the wilderness where she would be taken care of for a time, times and half a time, out of serpent's reach. So she's in the world, she's in the nations of the people, and she's out of the serpent's, she's out of harm's way from the serpent. He spews water out of his mouth like a river too, and the earth drinks it up to overtake the woman. But then when we go to Revelation, and we see this woman riding a beast, and she comes out of the wilderness. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names and blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So we've had this woman go into the wilderness, and she's nourished for a while away from the dragon. But then from Revelation 12 to Revelation 17, we now see this woman riding out of the wilderness on this dragon beast. And I'm wondering if this is the same woman, and that it's the church, because now she's whoring with Babylon. Okay, so she's the church of the people who believe in Jesus, or who were protected in the wilderness. Now they're the whore. They're the whore of the Babylonian mystery religion, and they're riding the dragon. And it reminds me of Exodus 32, when I will just read that now. And when the people saw Moses delayed to come down off the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said unto him, Make us a god which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what is become of him. And Aaron said unto them, Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives and of your sons and your daughters, and bring them unto me. And all the people brake off the golden earrings which were in the ears, and brought them unto Aaron, and he received them at their hand, and fashioned it with a graving tool, after he had made it a molten calf. And they said, These be the gods of Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. So the story kind of reminds me of this scene in Exodus where the people demand of Aaron to make them a god, because Moses is up the mountain and he's taking too long, and so they go off back into their pagan worship. And Moses is a picture of Jesus, where Jesus has gone away and he's up in the mountain of Zion, the new kingdom, and people are saying, where is he? He's not coming back. Where's this kingdom? And they're down here, and they're getting back into Babylonian mystery religion via the church. The church has gone into the wilderness and been nurtured from the dragon, but she's come out of the wilderness and she's actually riding the dragon now. And so the church has become this whore of mystery Babylon. And this is exactly what's really happened with the Roman Catholic Church in its inception. Was, they claimed that the apostles were the early leaders of the church, but at some point it's come out of this place, and now it's into mystery Babylon religion, and it's riding a dragon, and the dragon is behind this church. The dragon and the dragon and the church are one. They are, I believe, of the same family of Idumean converts to the Jewish faith, and at some point they have infiltrated into Roman throne, and they have infiltrated and created or recreated their own religion based on temple worship, as in Freemasonry, the Freemasonic Solomon's Temple worship, which is tied in with the Vatican as well. And they've created this new temple, the Roman system is based on this temple and the priesthood, with the Pope as the high priest. And I have been to the Vatican, and these aren't my photos, but I do have a photo of a fresco inside the Vatican of the All-Seeing Eye. It's painting in clouds. And there are many depictions of this all over the Vatican. So it shows this historical link to this religion that is also tied to these Babylonian mystery religions. And somebody has, at some point, decided to amalgamate this with the early Christian church. And it says that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And we all know the history there of the persecution of anyone who contradicted the authority of this church. And it says the beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. So it was. So if it's a dragon, then it was a kingdom, and then it wasn't, and yet it comes back again. And in Revelation 20, it says it rises out of the pit in Revelation 17 and goes into perdition. And in Revelation 20, we have, and I saw the angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and the great chain in his hand. And he laid hold of the dragon, that old serpent which is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit. So this is sort of going back. In Revelation 17, it's speaking in future and future tense, past tense. So at the time the woman is riding the beast, obviously it's not in the pit. She comes out of the wilderness. But what happens at some point, this dragon gets put into this pit. The angel chains it in there, spiritually chained. And which is metaphoric of it losing its power, losing its ability to persecute, losing its position, but still having its presence is still there via the other two beasts. And it's shut up, and a seal is placed upon it so that it can no longer deceive the nations till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that, it must be loosed for a little season. And here in verse 7, it says, when the 1,000 years have expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog. And I'm going to do a bit more investigation into who Gog and Magog are, but for now, we're just talking about this dragon, this serpent, and it's coming up out of the pit. So in Revelation 17, at this point where it says it was and is not, and then it shall ascend again out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition, and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they beheld the beast that was and is not and yet is. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth, and is of the seven, and goeth into perdition. So At some point, we've got the first 7 heads, and then the one that comes up out of the pit is the 8th, or the whole beast. It's still alive in some ways. So this is where it gets confusing, because some of this is future tense, and because the heads don't necessarily have to exist all in the one time. We're talking something that was, something that existed, something that seems to have disappeared from our realm, political realm, and then it returns again. So I think that if this family, this Herod Flavian family, has invented Christianity, it's completely contrary to their agenda. We have this family that is struggling to keep control of Judea at the time, and on the scene arrives Jesus, and nobody accepts him anyway. We have the priesthood in the temple who reject him, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, all of them reject him. We have this family that obviously rejects him and tries to murder him because they are terrified of this ancient prophecy of the Messiah who could completely undermine their whole kingdom. And then we have Rome that just, it doesn't matter to Rome. I mean, we look at Pontius Pilate, he doesn't see why this is such a problem. And then we have the fall of Jerusalem and Vespasian sacking Jerusalem, because it just all went out of control. The fact that there was so much contention in Judea at the time was not because of Jesus. It was already there. And I mean, maybe, there was a little bit of impact, and things were unraveling. There was so much political infighting, and they were fighting to be kings, they were fighting to be high priests, everyone had different opinions, and then they hated the Romans controlling their nation, and the Herod kings who were hand in glove with the Romans. So this was going to happen anyways. And then you get to Rome, and Christianity was nothing. It was just a blip, really, at that point. So the idea that these Herods invented Christianity makes absolutely zero sense. It did not control the outcome of the situation in Judea. What it does seem to me that happened here was that it later became a problem for them. And so what they did to control this situation was they subverted it and they made it their own. And, Constantine wasn't until 300 years after the birth of Christ. So why did it take so long for this dynasty and for the emperors to convert to this religion that they supposedly created? And when they converted to it, they completely changed the whole meaning of it. So to me, what they have done is they have realized the potential to control the world through it. They knew the importance of church and state to rule a people, and they had lost that when the temple was destroyed. And so what they have done is they've used this new religion to create a new church and state. And that seems to me the more logical answer here, that perhaps there were some historians who were onto them about this genealogical line, and rather than deny it, if people look into it, what they can therefore do is say that they made up this story that these same people also created the entire story of Christianity, or the spiritual evolution of people, and a spiritual evolution of people so people do not need these dictators controlling their lives. I mean, you will be kings and priests. What dominating dynasty wants to tell people through their religion that they can be kings and priests themselves of their own lives? They don't want that. And that is something that the Roman Catholic priesthood has tried to subvert in its followers. Whatever Christianity is, or wherever it came from, whether you want to believe that the Son of God literally was born on earth, or it is a mystery, mystics belief that started to grow in Judea and Rome, whatever it is, its initial inception was from a belief in people that they could be sovereign. So that's just my take on this whole subject. That's my reasoning, because from what I understand from the scriptures, there's so much to be learnt, and so much that it is far deeper than church understanding can give you. And I'm going to leave it there. I will probably look into these early church fathers now and see if there's any links between the Herod Flavian family with the initiation of the Roman Catholic Church and the Holy Roman Empire. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.